والسلام على سيدنا محمد الطيب الطاهر الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord and sustainer of the worlds. May prayer and blessings and salutations descend upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family members, his righteous companions, and all who follow his guidance until the day of recognition. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, today the topic will be a follow-up to a khutbah that was given this Friday by Imam Anas in relationship to the need to have a spiritual home. But what I wanted to do today is to do a few things. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me because I wanted to go back over a couple of things that he mentioned on Friday, just for emphasis. I wanted to provide a spiritual framework for the need of community. I also want to say a few words in words of reflection on the passing of Muhammad Ali. May Allah have mercy on him. And I think that is something that we can glean some insights from, inshallah. But before I do any of that, I wanted to say and make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala this evening for mercy. Ask Allah ta'ala for mercy and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to comfort the hearts of the people who lost family members or friends in the tragic crime that occurred in Orlando, Florida, at a club. It was a nightclub, a gay nightclub, and there was an incident that occurred, a senseless murder, and the reports are that 50 people were killed, and perhaps 50 or more are wounded. And of course, this is tragic enough on its own, but some of the media reports that I've seen have identified the perpetrator as a Muslim named Umar Mateen, and they are even suggesting that he had taken a pledge of allegiance to the so-called Islamic State, and that he was doing this in the name of the Islamic State. Therefore, this has been declared an act of terrorism by many, if not all. And of course, we have to be mindful of the times that we live in. So we have to remember, for our own spiritual well-being, for our own emotional well-being, for our own mental well-being, and for the well-being of our families, for our children, that these are turbulent times. These are times of chaos. There's a tremendous chaos within the religious body of Muslims, and that we are a part of that body. And so consequently, we feel the turmoil, we feel the discomfort, we feel the pain, we feel the stares, the accusations, we feel all of this because we're a part of the Ummah. We are a part of the Muslim community. But truth is truth. And for the sake of speaking truth, we know that killing people, innocent people, no matter who they are, no matter what you think about them, is nothing that the law condones. nothing that the Prophet ﷺ taught or condoned. And we must be firm in our understanding of this. No matter how stories are spun, no matter how words of people are expressed, even if these people are Muslim, or if they say they're Muslim, we must remain steadfast in our knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our Lord, and Allah has ordained upon us religion and deen. And that deen is not hatred. That deen is not evil. That deen is not murder. That deen is love. That deen is justice. That deen is equality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not condone racism, does not condone injustice, does not condone any of these things. All of these things are realities of the human condition. Race is a category. Race is a category, a social category. Gender is a social category. All of these categories reflect how we live in the world as we know it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala transcends all of that. And so it is befitting for us that we are mindful to utter a prayer of support, a prayer of concern, a prayer of love. Because what was done in the name of something other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And although we believe that it's Ramadan, we're fasting, we're taught in the tradition that Shaitan is locked up, or the devils are locked up, Shaitan has many disciples. And those disciples are busy. And so we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He protect us from any harm, and that He give us of all good, and forgive us for our sins during this blessed month of Ramadan. Ameen. As I mentioned, I wanted to piggyback off of some of the things that were mentioned in the Khutbah on Friday, but before I do that, I'm going to recite the verses that will provide the frame for this talk about and around community. And the verses are from Surah Al-Imran, which is Surah 3. If you've been reading your 30th, you will have already read these verses. So hopefully some of the remarks will provide some additional insights to the insights that you may have already gleaned from reading these verses. In Surah Al-Imran, which is the family of Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatih, wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun, wa'tasimu bihablillahi jami'an ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون ولا تكونوا كالذين تفرقوا واختلفوا من بعد ما جاءهم البينات وأولئك لهم عذاب عظيم. By way of English translation, Allah Most High says, O you who have attained to faith, be conscious of Allah with all the consciousness that is due to Him, and do not allow death to overtake you, or you have surrendered yourselves unto Him. And hold fast altogether unto the bond of Allah, and do not draw apart from one another. And remember the blessings which Allah has bestowed upon you, how when you were enemies, He brought your hearts together, so that through His blessing you became brethren. And how when you were on the brink of a fiery abyss, He saved you from it. In this way, Allah makes His signs or His messages. In this way, Allah makes clear His messages unto you, so that you might find guidance. And that there might grow out of you a community of people who invite unto all that is good, and enjoin the doing of what is right, and forbid the doing of what is wrong. And it is they who shall attain to a happy state. And be not having a spiritual home, somewhere where the people know you and you know them, somewhere where the people accept you and you accept them, somewhere where it's safe for you to be who you are, in the sense that everyone amongst us is different. Everyone amongst us is different in their understanding of Islam, the degree to which they are committed to a practice of Islam in their life. Everyone is different in regards to their needs. And so we have, even in our own families, varying degrees of needs. We have people that need a lot of attention, and we have others that need less attention. And in some of our families, we have people who are ability challenged. They have physical challenges. They may have emotional challenges. Some family members have mental challenges. In our communities, as well as our families, we have disparities in intellect, in ability. All of these things represent some of the differences that must be not just tolerated, but in fact accommodated. And in a community space is no different than a family space in that regard, because the community is made up of the families that are a part of it. And so on Friday, we heard some of the practical benefits of having a spiritual home. And I want to repeat some of the things that were mentioned because they're very important. And they represent, some of you may know, some of you may not, but one of the things that we do here at the masjid, and Allah has blessed us to do, is to provide a certain number of services. And some of the services include counseling, spiritual counseling, as well as general counseling to the best of our ability, right? And so some of the things that were mentioned in the khutbah Friday they're anecdotal things. They are things that the imams have actually heard and experienced, right? Somebody check, can you, afterwards? Some of these things are anecdotal, right? In terms of what has been heard, what has been experienced. And they were mentioned as examples. So one of the statements that was made in the khutbah on Friday is that our religion has standards. And in order to meet the standards, there are processes that must be developed. There are procedures. There are methods that help us achieve these standards. And so one of the practical benefits of being involved and having a spiritual home is that these standards are met. And having a spiritual home assures a degree of accountability. And our accountability is mutual. So it's not just that the individual is accountable to the community is accountable also to the individual, right? So there's a form of transaction that takes place, right? This transaction is that there's an expectation of a standard, and from the community member, from the individual, and then the standard being delivered is the accountability or what the leadership in that community is accountable for. And these standards also represent a form of protection, and safety and security. Because when you show up in a community, it's different when you show up to an individual. It's different showing up to an individual than showing up in a community. When you show up in a community, you have to respect the boundaries that are established in the community. And so the Imam mentioned some things that I'm going to repeat because they represent a reality that not just we face, a reality that our children face, our young people. So he mentioned, for example, sham marriages. This is a very serious issue in the Muslim community. Very serious. And he mentioned some examples of sham marriages. So he mentioned like a marriage that occurs under a street light. Right? Now some folk might think that that's a form of romantic love, that somebody proposes and you accept and you get married under a street light, but it's really it's a terrible thing, right? He mentioned Dunkin' Donut marriages. And the only reason that he mentioned it is because that is a real thing that actually happened more than once, right? Marriages by phone, where there is no boundary, there is no, consideration given to the sanctity of marriage, the sacredness of marriage, right? Paperless, non-witness marriages, where a brother shows up, and this brother may show up to perform the marriage as an official, but he's not credentialed to do this, right? Or where the parties involved in the marriage both have rights, legal rights, in addition to the commitments that they make to one another, the commitments of love and companionship and friendship, but there are also legal commitments. And these legal commitments cannot be fulfilled or honored or maintained outside the boundary of communal structure. And the way that we know this is that every time we wring our hands in frustration because a couple shows up and they've been a party to one of these types of marriages, there are many other forms of marriage that occur that may not, in fact, be Sharia compliant, right? But people indulge in them anyway, and then they show up to the masjid when there's a problem with an expectation that now the imam is supposed to wave a magic wand and fix your problem. And a part of that is that the imam doesn't even know who you are, let alone how this marriage took place. And that's a big problem, right? But the talk today is not about those types of marriages. The talk is about the problem of people not belonging somewhere, so that there can be some accountability. So that when a brother shows up and proposes to a sister, that he is held accountable not only by his word of commitment, but also by the boundaries of the community, the religious community that he belongs to, and the same for the sister. And another example of these marriages, and this is how these types of things can spiral out of control. So now I'm told that there's even a form of, like, there are people, and social media is an incredible thing, right? So I found this bit of information out through social media, that some people, young Muslims, not all of them, but some young Muslims are now posting that they've been married like 4 or 5 times in a calendar year. Right? And then when you think about it logically, you might say, well, how is this possible? That somebody can be married 4 or 5 times in a calendar year. Right? And so just doing a little investigation, I discovered that part of what that means is that some of these folk are in 4 or 5 different sexual relationships. And so the entering into a sexual relationship is in fact taking the place of a proper marriage. Right? And so the space that this is happening in is society and community. And a part of who it happens to are people that we may or may not know. Some of the people that may be indulging in this behavior are people that we may or may not know. And so a part of the remedy is that we must rebuild community so that we can hold people accountable, because this type of behavior represents lawlessness. And the remedy for lawlessness is law. And so we go back to the original point. Islam has structure, Islam has laws, Islam has rules that we are governed by. Right? Another thing that was mentioned in the khutbah was the janazah. Because oftentimes, and this is a really big problem, again, another example of a problem in the community, is when people float around from masjid to masjid. And so we may know them through some encounter, some social encounter as a Muslim. But then when something happens and there are rights connected to the individual, like rights that they have over us, or their family's rights over them, or their rights to their family, you find yourself dealing with a situation where, so an example of this is when people don't have something like a will, when people become Muslim and they may not have had some necessary conversations with their family members who are not Muslim. And then said this person passes away, and the Muslims, the community, his community, shows up to fulfill the religious rights, and the non-Muslim family knows nothing about this. Because perhaps the person that had no proper affiliation with a community. And so we find ourselves engaged now in a struggle, right? Oftentimes, we relinquish the rights of the family. We give the families the family their rights. So as a result of doing this, sometimes people who are professed Muslims are buried as non-Muslims. And I mean, this is a real thing, right? So the benefit of having a community where you are known, where your vital information is known, where you took Shahada and it's documented and it's known, and you were known to be a practicing Muslim in that community, all of these are things that are very important as it relates to the social aspect of Islam. And then the part of the verification letters that was mentioned on Friday, right? And I love the way that it was expressed, because these are the type of letters that we get asked to provide for people. You know, my right to wear niqab, my right to wear hijab. You know, I'm a Muslim. This letter verifies that I'm a Muslim. You know, my right to grow a beard, right? All of these are types of letters, but all of these letters represent a part of what it means to be a Muslim. Because the essence of being a Muslim means that you show up consciously in whatever space you find yourself in as a Muslim. And the way that that's verified by other people is not a letter from the Imam, but you're standing in your community. And that's currency that you either have or you don't. Because there are some people who don't need a letter for all the folk that they associate with to know that they're Muslim. There are some women who choose not to wear hijab, right? But everybody knows that they're Muslim. There are people who don't have beards, but everybody knows that they're Muslim. Because Islam is not a look. Being Muslim is not a look. It's not a style of dress. It's a lot deeper than that, right? And so these are some of the things that were mentioned that I wanted to reiterate before I get into some reflections on the verse, right? Because, of course, the thinking around community, particularly as it relates to what it means to be Muslim in the United States, has to be framed around the Quranic injunctions that call us to unity and togetherness and brotherhood and sisterhood. And so the verses that I recited at the beginning speak to some of these ideas. And I want to focus specifically on the verse in which Allah Ta'ala says, "And that they may grow out of you a community of people who invite unto all that is good." Right? Because a part of community living in Islam is like individual living in Islam. And that is that through your example of living, you are in fact fulfilling an obligation that all Muslims face in one way or another. What is that obligation? That obligation, we talk about it all the time. You know how people say you give dawah, right? So part of what a Muslim must do is give dawah, right? And Allah mentioned it in the verse, يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ, right? Let there rise among you a group or a community of people who invite unto all that is good, right? And this invitation, this da'wah occurs first and foremost by way of your character and your behavior. More than anything else, more than anything that you can say, more than any book that you can give someone, more than any lecture that you can give or invite someone to, more than any verbiage, your lived example, and this is in fact the sunnah of the Prophet, his lived example, how he lived his life. How he lived his life, right? And so we find that this verse is speaking to us about the necessity to invite to all that is good by way of our behavior. So this means that our behavior has to be good behavior. And it is a part of the reality of living in the dunya that in order to live goodness, you have to have support. I mean, human nature, we're social creatures. And we gravitate to those things that are supportive in their nature. So if I am socially striving to be good, I need the support of good people. And likewise, if I'm living life heedlessly, I'm going to gravitate to those people who are not going to remind me of goodness. Right? This is just a natural thing about us human beings. And so, congregating as a community is one of the ways that we are able to nurture this goodness. Because this goodness lives within the most important part of Bani Adam, the son of Adam, the daughter of Adam, their soul. And so community is where we can practice what it means to be spirits who are having a physical experience, because that is the reality of who we are. The dalil, the evidence for that is that when the physical body dies, the spirit lives on. When the physical body dies, it takes its last breath, the spirit moves on to another realm of existence. Another form of living. And so, a part of being a Muslim is that we focus on this spirit, cultivating it, pushing the spirit forward. Because from a religious perspective, the spirit is what matters. The spirit is all there is, right? And so, community life provides that safe space to do that. Because when you talk like this in other spaces in the world, folk may frown at you, you know. To people who push the material before the spiritual, you sound like a crazy person. Why? Because the physical body has needs, they say. You know, you need material things to live, they say. And there's truth in all of this. But those truths do not rise above the truth of the reality of the soul. And so we can address the well-being of the soul and the matters that are in the best interest of the soul by congregating as a community. And the way that we nourish the soul and accomplish this ideal is through prayer and fraternal support. Prayer and fraternal support, first and foremost. Because these are the two things that we need to fortify us. To carry out another part of what Allah said in the verse. So he said, call to good. يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. And then they call to the establishment of spiritual norms. The spiritual norm is goodness. The spiritual norm is goodness. The spiritual norm is goodness. And what is goodness? Goodness is found in kindness, in compassion, in love, and in service. These spiritual values represent what goodness is. And people need a space where they can nurture these values. Right? وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ. They call to the good, the common good. A part of calling to the common good is reminding one another of the common good. Right? And the opposite of the norm of goodness is evil. The promotion of evil, the acceptance of it, the support of it. And Allah says this in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُ بِالْعَدْلِ وَالْإِحْسَانِ وَإِيتَاءِ ذِي الْقُرْبَى. Every Friday, the Imam ends the khutbah with what? Verily, Allah enjoins justice and goodness and giving to those who are close to you. Every Friday, the Imam says this. And then the opposite of that is what? وَيَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ وَالْبَغْيِ. And Allah forbids wrongdoing, transgression, and oppression. Right? And so our communities must become these sanctuaries that allow us to grow these values, to develop them, to live them, and to promote them. Another aspect or another reflection from the verse is that as believers, we are called to a degree of spiritual loyalty. This is what brotherhood and sisterhood, this is what it's about. There's a spiritual loyalty between the believers. Now, loyalty is a word that people love. I love it because I believe in loyalty. But I recognize that there are degrees to loyalty. So there's the typical normal loyalty that we expect in a friendship, for example. Because part of loyalty is that there's a trust and a bond and a safety that you have in me, or you find in me, wherein I will not betray you or harm you or injure you. Right? Well, there is something, a higher degree of this loyalty is the spiritual loyalty. And the spiritual loyalty is between the believers. And it is encapsulated in this notion of enjoining the good, reminding one another of the good, وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, and forbidding the evil. Speaking up. When we know that people are engaged in wrong behavior, speaking up, saying something about it, speaking to it. Right? When we recognize that our brothers and sisters are in a place of crises, coming to their aid, providing support, not just financial support, right? See, this is Ramadan, and a part of what we talk about is kindness and generosity, but we have to understand that charity and generosity is a state of the soul before it's an act of the limb, right? So sometimes you can give, but the state of your soul, your heart, is not in the giving, right? Because the giving can just be a routine, a rote act, right? But showing concern, coming to the aid of one another, right? These are all some of the spiritual benefits. The loyalty between the believers is carried out through these behaviors. And these behaviors can only really be actualized when we strive and struggle to live together as a community. These values, these virtues are actualized when we strive to live together as a community. And a part of how we continue to grow these values is that we constantly refine our moral and ethical clarity and sharpen it through constantly seeking guidance from the Quran and from the lived example of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are just some reflections on the verses that I recited earlier, beginning with verse 102 from Ali Imran. Inshallah, I hope that you will find it in yourselves to go back and to review these verses and to ask Allah for additional insights from this guidance, inshallah. So before I wrap up, I wanted to wrap up with just some reflections on Muhammad Ali. Allah have mercy on him. I'm sure that everyone knows, even the young people know. You guys know who Muhammad Ali was, right? What was it? Who was Muhammad Ali? He was a boxer, right? But a long, long, long time ago, before you guys were born, right? He was a heavyweight champion. He was a Muslim, and he passed away. And one of the beautiful things, out of the many beautiful things that emerged from this event, is that, so the janazah, I read somewhere, was attended by 15,000 people. Now, if you can just imagine a janazah attended by 15,000 people, right? Now, I want to go back to something that I said about the janazah in the context of community living. Because we've all attended janazahs. So we know what that's about. But one of the things that I want to call your attention to is to think about the difference of a janazah that you go to, because it's the janazah of a person that you knew about, that you heard about, that had some notoriety. They were somebody that was known in the community. And at that janazah, you offer a prayer, right? Because it's customary to offer a prayer, right? And what type of prayer do you offer at the janazah? Anybody? What type of prayer do we offer at the janazah? Go ahead.
Make your grave wide.
Make your grave spacious. What else?
Bless their soul.
Bless their soul. What else? And we pray for forgiveness. What else?
Let not their passing be a trial for the living.
Let not their passing be a trial for the living. We make all of these prayers, right? But think about the difference between the janazah of a person that you know about in a tertiary sense and the janazah of a person that you know because you've had a relationship with them, because you know them, because you've had some lived life, some lived experiences with them. Isn't it safe to say that the supplication is a little deeper? Right? I mean, and that's a part of what it means when we pray for each other. The prayer is more meaningful when you pray for people that you know. That's just our human nature. Right? And that's a beautiful thing about the janazah. When you make a heartfelt prayer, as opposed to possibly showing up at an event, because sometimes the janazah is an event. I mean, people show up at the janazah and quickly forget that the janazah is about the deceased and then us. You know, and I've witnessed it, you know, personally. You know, we forget and we start talking about the game, right? And it's almost like Allah is showing us, not almost, Allah is showing us the reality. Right? And so these are reminders. We have to remind ourselves. Right? So part of community life is that we are reminded of the value of the person while living, and also, as Sister Anissa said, let not their passing be a trial. Part of the trial is that we lose that value when they pass. But we thank Allah for the value that they provided in their lives while they're living, and we make dua to Allah for the best reward for them for providing that value when they pass. But back to Muhammad Ali, right? One of the videos, because I spent the whole week just going, because he was a hero of mine and someone that I genuinely loved. I really loved Muhammad Ali, right? And so I spent the whole week going, looking, like following stuff on social media, and looking at old videos and reading old articles. And I came across this video that really struck me in a very profound way. Because the video, he was in front of an audience, I believe he was in England. And he was talking to a room full of non-Muslim people, mostly white people. And so they were asking him all kinds of questions. And one of the questions that they asked him was, so champ, what are you going to do with your life when this is over, when you retire? Now, you know, when you ask people that kind of question, particularly people who achieve something in life, people say they're going to retire, they're going to enjoy life, right? They're going to get a boat that they've been dreaming about, or a house that they've been dreaming about, or they're going to travel the world. And all of these are fine things, permissible things. There's nothing wrong with that. But Muhammad Ali said something that was very profound. Muhammad Ali said, I'm going to prepare to meet God. Totally unexpected that he would say that, at least in my opinion, as an answer to that question. I'm going to prepare to meet God. And he proceeded to talk about what life is really about. He said, I have money, I have fame, I had all that stuff. That stuff's not important. It's a blessing, but it's not important. I have to get prepared to meet God, right? So I wanted to share a quote that he said. He said, this life is not real. This life is not real. I conquered the world and it did not bring me satisfaction. God gave me this illness to remind me that I'm not number one or the greatest, but He is. Right? And so one of the things that we find in our tradition that's stated is that a person should constantly ask Allah for something called, in Arabic it's called Husnul Khatimah. We translate it in English as a good ending. What does that mean? This idea is based upon many traditions attributed to the Prophet ﷺ, in which the Prophet asserts, and he speaks very clearly to the idea that a person could live their entire life doing the deeds of the people of paradise, but then have their predetermined fate interrupt, and they end up doing the deeds of the people of the fire, and they end up going to the fire. I'm paraphrasing a very long hadith. But the essence of the hadith is that there are no guarantees as it relates to guidance, because that's not your thing. That's Allah's business. This is why we have to be careful of becoming full of ourselves, or becoming so self-righteous about what we are doing, or giving, or saying, or teaching, or where we go, or who we're with, right? Because we understand that the nature of the human soul is so delicate and fragile, right? That we are always humbled before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so that we should be reminded that ultimately we are all in need of Allah's mercy. But I mentioned that good ending in relationship to Muhammad Ali because by all accounts, Wallahu ta'ala a'lam, Allah knows best, but by all accounts, that we can attest to. Muhammad Ali had a good ending. A part of what we know commonly, we commonly know and believe that when a believer passes, is it a good thing or not for there to be a lot of people at the janazah in attendance? It's a good thing. That is a good thing. We were taught this by the Prophet, right? Because all of those people praying for you, that's a good thing, right? Well, Muhammad Ali, may Allah be pleased with him, he got that, right? But in addition to that, we can look at his life now and say that Allah blessed him with a life well lived from a spiritual perspective, because he realized an essential truth. And that essential truth is what? This life is not real. And it is a tremendous blessing from Allah to realize that. And it is a tremendous test from Allah to not realize that. To believe that this life is real. That we get so hung up on this life and the trials of this life and the tests of this life that we forget that essential truth. That is really not real. It's not real. That the only real about this life is the spirit that dwells within your body and what you do with it. And Muhammad Ali was blessed to live life that way. And all we have to do is look at what he spent his life doing, not saying. What he spent his life doing, because it will serve as a powerful reminder to us all. This is a man that gave more da'wah, we talked about da'wah, by his presence, by smiling at people, by shaking their hand, by hugging them, by showing genuine concern for the person across from him. Then many scholars, du'at, students of knowledge, imams, really, if truth is told. And so we can conclude that Allah blessed Muhammad Ali with an ending of life that was amazing and unexpected. It was amazing and unexpected. How many times was the name Muhammad, which was the name of our Prophet, ﷺ, said in the past 10 days, 2 weeks? How many times? How many times did you hear the story of the Hollywood Walk of Fame? Because Muhammad Ali got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. It's one of the biggest honors that a person can get, right? How many times have you heard the story that his star is not on the ground, it's on the wall, because he refused to allow them to put the name of our beloved Prophet on the ground so people could walk on it? And you think that that's a small thing. That's not a small thing. That's a big thing. That's a huge thing, right? He connected to people through his lived values of love, good companionship, and kindness. Yes, he accumulated wealth, but it's not his wealth that people are going to remember him for. People are not going to say, I met Muhammad Ali and I knew him and I loved him because he gave me $10,000. No. And you can go behind me and read the stories that people are sharing about the time that they met Muhammad Ali and the things that he did. And inshallah, we can find inspiration in a life that was lived in our time, close to us, to strive to be better servants, right? And to ask Allah Ta'ala in closing for an ending that's good, right? Because when you think about it, I said it's amazing and unexpected, because I mentioned 15,000 people at the janazah, but not just that. millions of people in the world praying for this brother. I shared on one of my social media accounts that people in Egypt wrote me that they were making Salatul Janazah in absentia for Muhammad Ali. You know how many people that is praying for this one person? All over the world. That's amazing. That's like, wow. I'm sure he could not, they say he planned his end of life things. I'm sure he did not plan for that. Because you can't plan for that. But that is one of the indications that Allah is Akbar. Allah is in control. And that when you live your life a certain way, it will not be in vain. If you commit to live the values, these values of the Spirit, it will not be in vain. It is never in vain. And so let that be the lesson for all of us, young and old. Right? So you young people want somebody that you can model your life after. If you go into athletics, doesn't mean you have to be a nut, just running around doing all kinds of crazy stuff and throwing money around and nobody can tell you nothing. No, that's not the only model that's out there. Now you have a model that you can go back and read about. Right? So some of you have Facebook accounts, you can go on your Facebook accounts and read the stories. Muhammad Ali was young when he started living his life right. He was a young man. Right? So that means that you don't have to be an old person to be righteous. Right? You don't have to wait, because there's nothing to wait for. And pray that Allah Ta'ala blesses you, that you will have a way to impact people in this manner by your presence. And may Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala have mercy on our beloved brother. May Allah forgive him his sins. May Allah accept all of his deeds and bless him with his pleasure. And so, inshallah, that concludes the talk this evening. And inshallah, we leave room for questions if there are questions. Yes.
When you speak about the people that comes to the janazah,
Yes.
is it the same important if those people are there that are not Muslim and they make the prayer, then they pray for you, or are you talking in terms of all the Muslims that pray?
So the part I was focusing on was the Muslims that pray for a person. People who show up to the janazah, who may be friends or acquaintances or that aren't Muslim, you know, I can't speak to how Allah would answer their prayer or not, but that's a different topic. That's a different topic. Anyone else? Okay. So, yeah. Wa alaikum assalam.
You were talking about Ali, right?
Yes, sir.
They still didn't bury him yet, right?
I believe they're buried in Friday. Yeah,
All
Friday.
right, mashallah. I'm glad they did when we did that.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay. So we're going to close out with dua. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept our fasting. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept our recitation of the Quran. We ask Allah Ta'ala to open up insights to us from our recitation of the Quran. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to bless us to see ourselves in the Quran. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to accept our giving of charity during this month of Ramadan. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept our hosting of iftar during this blessed month of Ramadan. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to help us help ourselves. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to improve our spiritual condition. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to improve our physical condition. We ask Allah Ta'ala to improve our economic condition. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to improve our mental condition and our emotional condition. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala for all of the good of the blessed month of Ramadan. We ask Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala to forgive us the forgiveness that He has promised for fasting in the month of Ramadan, that our our previous sins are all forgiven. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our fast. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our standing in the night prayer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our supplications for ourselves and for one another. May Allah ta'ala protect our families from all evil, from all harm. May Allah ta'ala bless our children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our children. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless our children. Oh Allah, we ask that you accept this prayer from us during this blessed month of Ramadan. We ask that you accept this prayer with the blessing of Al-Fatiha.